All right, welcome back. So we are on day 5 after just working on our making our pictures and our posters using our parallelograms and squares. So today we're going to talk about, again, a few more things we've seen before, a couple things we haven't seen, so it's better to refresh our memories so that way we know what the new stuff is. So let's go ahead and talk about slope-intercept form. We should all be aware that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where my slope is m and my intercept is b. So we're going to use this example of y is equal to 4x plus 3. We're going to use that in a moment. So we saw horizontal lines the other day. That's where they're left to right. So the slope of a horizontal line will be 0. If you remember your slope formula, y is on top, y's are not changing, so you'll end up with 0 on top. Next is our vertical line. Again, that's where you go up and down. That's x equals something. Your slope here will be undefined. Oof, let me try that again. Why is it undefined? Well, the reason it's undefined is because when you find your slope, remember we have the change of y over the change of x. Well, if your vertical line is when it's always an x value, you're going to have the same x value minus x value, which means you're going to get 0 on the bottom. And if you remember, we cannot ever divide by 0. Divide by 0, it's an undefined thing. So that is why my slope is undefined. Okay, parallel slope. So we're going to be asked to determine whether or not lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So when we are looking for a parallel slope, my parallel slopes will be the same. So if we refer back to that example above, y is equal to 4x plus 3, my slope that I'd want in this case would be a slope of 4. So we could have, say, y is equal to 4x minus 2. Compared to my original example, 4 and 4, same slope. Now, when I'm talking about a perpendicular slope, that's when I'm going to have the opposite reciprocal. You're probably like, what the heck is that? Now, opposite means opposite sign. So if I'm using that same example from above, I'm going to have the opposite sign, so it's going to be negative, because if you notice, my 4 is positive. Reciprocal means that I'm going to take it as a fraction and flip it. So originally I have 4 over 1. So the reciprocal of that is going to be 1 over 4. So if your slope is a whole number, your reciprocal will be 1 over that whole number. So I would look for something that looks along the lines of y is equal to negative 1/4 x plus 10. So parallel slopes have the same, perpendicular are opposite reciprocals. And then 2 real quick equations we're going to use. Point slope form, which is y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1, where x1 and y1 are a given point. X and y are just themselves, because if you think about it, think about your y-intercept, you have x and y in them by themselves. We're not going to plug in numbers for them. And then another way of looking at the intercept form is x over a plus y over b is always equal to 1, where x and b are your x and y intercepts. Where a and b are your x and y intercepts, which we'll use here in a little bit. Okay, so we're going to find the slope. I know we have done this before. This should be easy, but again, we want to refresh our memory. So y2 minus y1, so that means I'm going to take my 5 because it's my second one, minus 2 over x2 minus x1. So x2 is my second x value. So 5 minus 2 is 3. 9 minus 4 is 5. I asked myself, can I reduce it? Nope. That's going to be my answer. All Alright, so I have 0 minus 4 over 12 minus 0. Now, negative 4, because 0 minus 4 is negative 4. Remember, signs are important. So I get negative 4 over 12, which reduces down to negative 1/3. Why does that matter? Well, because if you recall from the day 1, when we graphed, it's a lot easier to graph down 1 to the right 3 instead of down 4 to the right 12. This third one, again, my second y value minus my minus my first y value. So if you notice, negative, negative turns positive. And then 2 minus negative 2. Oops, excuse me. My apologies. 2 minus negative 4. I looked at my y values again. My apologies. Again, negative, negative turns positive. So negative 6 plus 2 gives me a negative 4. And 2 plus 4 gives me 6. I asked myself, can I reduce it down? Yep, divide everything by 2. I get 2 over 3. This last one here, 5 minus 5 over negative 7 minus 8. 5 minus 5 gives me 0. Negative 7 minus 8 gives me negative 15. 0 divided by anything will always be 0, so my slope here is 0. Now, you can also notice it would be 0 because what's the same? Well, my y values. Well, we just learned a couple days ago that, we just learned a couple slides ago that horizontal lines have a slope of 0, so if your y values are the same, it must be a horizontal line. Conversely, if you had something that was, say, 8, 2, and 8, 4, that would be a vertical line because your x's are the same, and that slope would be undefined. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the following equations and try and determine parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So first, we're going to put it in slope-intercept form. So if we take a look at the one all the way over here on the right, or excuse me, the left, you notice that first one's already in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. Well, that second one isn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to go ahead and move over that 15x because we want to get that y by itself. So I got 6y is equal to 15x plus 10. I want to get y by itself, so I have to divide it by 6. Now remember, when I divide a whole side by a number, I can split each thing up. I can divide 15 over 6 by 3, and I can get 5 over 2. And then I can do 10 over 6 divided by 2 each, so I can get 5 over 3. So the whole point of this is looking at this value right here. So I have 5 over 2, and I have 5 over 2. Those are exactly the same number, so therefore these two lines are parallel. Let's take a look at this middle one. Well, again, this first one's already ready to go. Let's change the second one. So I'm going to go ahead and have to rewrite it because my x is not first. So if y is equal to negative 5x plus 4, well, lo and behold, look at this slope and this slope. They're not the same, and they are not the opposite reciprocal, so therefore they must be neither. And this last one, again, that first equation's already ready for me, so I have to move this one. So I need to start by moving my 4x over. So I have 10y is equal to negative 4x plus 15. Divide everything by 10. I get my y by itself, so that means we're going to split everything over 10. I can reduce 4 and 10 by 2, so I can divide out and get negative 2 over 5x. And then I can take, 5 out of both the next ones, so I get 3 over 2. Let's go ahead and look at these values. I have negative 2/5, and I have 5/2. Okay, so remember, we're looking for opposite signs, which we do have. I have one negative, one positive. And if you notice, I took my 5/2 and I flipped it and got 2/5. So in this case, my lines are perpendicular. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to find the equation of a line with the x-intercept as 8 and the y-intercept as 4. That's where we're going to want to use that equation from the front. That was x over a plus y over b is 1. So instead of x and b, or excuse me, instead of a and b, we're going to have 8 and 4. So since my x-intercept is 8, I'm going to put the 8 underneath my x. Since the y-intercept is 4, I'm going to put the 4 under my y. And it's always equal to 1. That's just what it is. Now, I don't really like seeing equations with fractions, so I'm going to get rid of the fractions, or the denominators, by multiplying by the biggest number. Well, 8 is my biggest number, so I'm going to multiply everything by 8. So that means my 8's cancel, and I'm left with x. Over here I have 8 then divided by 4, which will give me a positive 2y. And then I have 1 times 8, which will give me 8. Now my equation's at least in the general form, which is better than still having fractions. Same idea. My x is going to go with my 9. My 3 is going to go with my y. I'm going to set it equal to 1. We're going to multiply by the biggest number. My biggest number here is 9. My 9's cancel. 9 divided by, my 9's cancel, leaving me with x. I apologize. My 9 divided by 3 will give me 3y. And 9 times 1 is just 9. Again, I don't know if you guys have seen it that way or not. It's a different way of writing it. Not too difficult, but different. Okay, last two problems. Find the equation of the line through the point 1, 4 and 5, negative 2. So I told you we had another equation, which was y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. Well, if you notice in that equation, we need a point, which, again, we have points of x1 and y1, and a slope. Well, I don't have that slope yet, so I'm going to have to go ahead and find it. So first is always find your slope, which we practiced earlier. So negative 2 minus 4 over 5 minus 1, which gives me negative 6 over 4, which again we can reduce down to 3 over 2. So now that we have that slope, we're going to plug it in. Now it really does not matter whichever point you want to pick. If you picked the opposite one than I do, you'll end up with the exact same answer. I just typically go with the first one. It's just the first thing. That's just what I do. So my equation tells me I have y minus my y value. Well, in this case, my y value is 4, so I have y minus 4 is equal to my slope of negative 3/2 times x minus, well, I have to use the same x value. Since I used my first point, I have to use my value of 1. Now, this is not a typical equation we're used to using, so we're going to go ahead and work with it a little bit. We're going to get it into slope-intercept form. So my y minus 4 stays. I'm going to distribute in this negative 3/2. So when I take a fraction times my x, it just gets multiplied with it. It's just like saying 1 times x or 3 times x, and it becomes 3x. Let's take a look at fraction times a whole number in a second, part by part. So first, you notice I have negative and negative. Well, that's going to turn that positive for me. Then I have 3 over 2 times 1. Now, that's going to still give me 3 over 2, but I don't like to deal with fractions because, you know, fractions scare me. So in my calculator, I'm going to take 3 divided by 2, which is going to tell me it's 1.5. Then last little step, add my 4. Y is equal to negative 3 halves x plus 5.5. Now you're probably like, why do I have fractions and decimals? Because if we were to actually graph this, remember we'd start with that 5.5 to 5.5, and then go down 3 to the right 2. So we want to try and keep our slope a fraction. All right, last problem. So we need that slope. So negative 1 minus 3 over 2 minus 8, which gives me negative 4 over negative 6. Negative over negative turns positive. Divide both by 2. I get my slope as 2/3, which if you'll notice is the opposite reciprocal of negative 3 halves, which is the slope above. So these lines are going to be perpendicular. Okay, so then I'm going to use my formula of y minus, again, I typically just pick the first one. Y minus 3 is equal to 2/3 x minus 8. So y minus 3 is equal to 2/3 x minus, now this gives me 5.33333333, and I know that 0.33333 is 1/3, so I'm just going to leave it as minus 5 1/3 because, again, don't really want to use decimals if I don't have to. Add over my 3. Y is equal to 2/3. Man, cannot get that 3 to come out today. 2/3 x minus 2 1/3. All right, see you guys tomorrow.